Hey guys, what's up? It's Emily. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I did this last year and it was super fun, so I thought I'd give it a swing this year. First of all, I feel like I just set my goals for the year and it's already almost halfway through. I'm filming this video on June 3rd, so it's slightly before mid-year. I just feel very on track for my goals because I set out in the beginning of the year to read 75 books. Last year I read 60, which is roughly like a little over a book a week. But then towards the end of the year, like November, December, I read a lot. Like I read like 11 books a month or something like that. So this year I was like, I definitely want to like up my goal. Let's do 75 instead of 52, which is what I've been doing, which is a book a week. I was like, I want it to be an attainable goal, but I want to push myself a little bit. I felt like 100 was just like, I didn't want to set myself up for failure, but I am, hold for Goodreads, I'm almost done with my 52nd book out of 75. A few weeks ago, I actually did up the goal to 100 because even with 100 books as my goal for the year, I'm 10 books ahead of schedule. I also had a goal this year to read more literary fiction and more nonfiction. So I wanted to do like a quick recap too by genre. Out of the 52 books I've read, I have read 6 literary fiction / contemporary fiction, which is a book a month, which is, you know, more than I read last year, I think. And one of them was long and difficult, which I'll get into later in this video. I feel like 6 books is fine. Like I'm fine with that. I wish it was a little higher, but I feel like if my goal is to read more of a certain genre, I'm not reading a lot of it, maybe for a specific reason. So to like force feed it down my face is like also not what I want to do. So I feel like, yeah, like a book a month, we love that. I'm happy with that. I read 13 fantasy books, which is not surprising to me. I do love fantasy. I'm gearing up for like a bit of a fantasy break though. Last month I didn't read that much fantasy. I do love that genre. I feel like sometimes if I read a lot of it at once, I get the worlds confused because sometimes there are a lot of very similar tropes and world building things going on that are just, this isn't focus, right? Yeah, that are just like a little bit too similar, so I kind of get them confused. So sometimes it's nice to have like a little break from fantasy. I kind of really like reading fantasy in the summer. I know a lot of people don't, but there's just something, I think it's because I read ACOTAR in the summer, I just associate fantasy with the summer. We'll see where we go this summer. Next, I have nonfiction / self-help. And I've read 13 nonfiction / self-help books. I'm really happy with that. I feel like I've been reading a lot more nonfiction than last year and just like learning a lot about things that interest me. And I feel like it's been a while since I've been in school, so I feel like I'm finally like rediscovering reading to learn things, because when you're in school, things are kind of just like, you're forced to read stuff, so you kind of need a break from it. But yeah, I've read a lot of really interesting stuff, from more like self-help based nonfiction to more like sociology based nonfiction to memoirs that deal with like psychology and memoirs that deal with like people going on the front lines of war. Like it's just a lot of different types of nonfiction I've been reading, and I feel like it's really like expanding my mind. And yeah, you can check out my Goodreads for all of the nonfiction books I've read this year. I've had a really nice combination of nonfiction books that like are kind of curated for people like me that are like trying to get back into nonfiction. Reading a lot of nonfiction books that are like easy to read, digestible. It's not like 15 million words in a page and super hard to get through. Give that a look. I've read 13 romance books. It's so funny because I always say like, I don't really like romance books. Like I don't really like rom-coms, but I do read a lot of them, like mainly as palate cleansers. Like I feel like to keep up my momentum with reading, like I do have to incorporate like rom-coms and romances into my, I was gonna say carousel. That's definitely not the word I want to use, but like into my like, there's a word I'm looking for. I have to incorporate romance, because if I'm reading just solely like nonfiction and like lit fic and even like fantasy, like you do kind of just need to like palate cleanse. It's like the same thing as like between drama series, like you put on Emily in Paris and like you don't really watch it kind of a thing. It's like the same thing for reading. Although I actually do read the books. It's just like, it's the purpose of those books is different than the purpose of me reading some of the other books that I read. But I honestly like this year compared to last year and the year before, the rom-com and romance books I've read, I've actually really like enjoyed and liked, and I've enjoyed the characters in them. So maybe, who knows, maybe I am becoming a little romance girly. after all. And then I read 6 thriller/mystery books. So overall, I'm really pleased with like the variety of books I've read. I do think that like reading a variety of books every month is, and like cycling, that's what the word is, cycling in palate cleanser, cycling in nonfiction books that are gonna expand your mind. Like it's just good to have like a nice cycle going, and I feel like I've found that this year more than any other year. Anyway, let's just get into the questions. The best book so far. I feel like that should be the last question. I'm gonna just get right into it. I'm gonna say, this is actually really hard because I've really enjoyed a lot of books this year. I will say probably the best book I read so far is Magnolia Park's Into the Dark. I've talked about this book in my wrap-ups and stuff, so I'll keep it short-ish. I edit these videos and I'm like, oh my god, like how long can this girl just yap for? But Magnolia Park's, yeah, this is the 5th book in the series. The 1st and the 3rd books are like Magnolia books, so they're about like Magnolia Parks, and then the 2nd and the 4th books are from Daisy Hate's perspective. She's a totally different character. The 1st book and the 3rd book, like I actually really did not like Magnolia, but I still managed to love the books, which is like Jessa Hastings. Like Jessa Hastings is just the best author. Like I love the way she writes her characters' voices. Anyway, all this to say, like the characters in this book, specifically Magnolia and BJ, I really understood them. Everything kind of came together. I not only appreciated a lot of stuff that happened in the 1st and the 3rd books from an appreciation of the author perspective, just like the way that Jessa Hastings kind of like tied everything in. I just actually grew to love these 2 characters, and to grow to love 2 absolutely spoiled brats, that's like a huge thing. And this book was just amazing. What's a better word to use? I'm a something for character studies. What's a better word to use than the one I want to use? I love character studies. This is like literally like the ultimate character study. I think I cried. Like, you know these characters so well. Like I've never felt like I've known a character more than the characters in these books. Yeah, I would give the best book so far to Magnolia Park's Into the Dark. It's actually a pretty thick book. It's like 700 pages. It doesn't look like it, but the next one I have the best sequel so far. The best sequel so far I must give to Crescent City 3, Sarah J. Maas, House of Flame and Shadow. I did love this book. The end was kind of like a little like, oh really? I will say, like, I actually can't say it because it's a spoiler. There's a character in this book that I really love. If you know, you know. If you know me and you watch my channel and if you've read this book, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Any book that has that character in it is just going to be my favorite. We went somewhere here with someone. And that is mainly why this is my favorite sequel of the year. I loved a lot of the characters in this. There were some storylines that I was like not the most into. Yeah, I mean, Sarah J. Maas just like creates these worlds, and this is definitely my least favorite Sarah J. Maas series out of the 3. I still really enjoyed it. I definitely cried. So yeah, I'm thinking of rereading ACOTAR this summer again. Also just like a beautiful book. Like it's a long book. I don't think these books, one thing I'll say about the Crescent City books, they do not need to be as long as they are. This is like 835 pages. I read all of the Crescent City books this year too. I read the first 2 in January. Then I read this one when it came out. Next book, I have a new release I haven't read yet, but I want to. I would love to read The Women by Kristen Hanna. I don't have the book. I've been wanting to read a lot of her books. Like I want to read The Nightingale and like some of her other stuff. I just hear they're really good books. They just seem very serious. It's just sunny out. Eventually I'll get there. I think maybe like in the fall, I think I'm gonna do like Secret History and like tackle some Kristen Hanna books. Let me know if any of you guys have read them, any of her books, and if you enjoyed them, which ones are your favorites, etc. Because she's definitely an author I want to check out, and I know The Woman is like a huge book this year. Most anticipated release of the second half of the year. I know this is like, first of all of my like truly anticipated releases were in the first half of the year. This is a polarizing author and series, but I am really excited for Reckless by Lauren Roberts. I know a lot of people critique this series. It comes out in July. I'm looking for like some fantasy, some romance in July. Like I think it's just kind of like the perfect book. It's a fantasy, but it's like really easy to read, and so for me that's just like the perfect equation for a summer book. I recently finished Powerful, the novella. I did enjoy it. I'm not like super obsessed with the books, but they're just like really easy to read and enjoyable to read, and that's really what the summer is all about. So I'm excited to read that one. Biggest disappointment, I've had a few. Let me like define the word disappointment here, because there's books where like you kind of have read the author a few times, don't really connect to it, and then you read another book by that same author and like you don't really connect to it. So is it a disappointment? Because it's like disappointment implies that like you expected it to be good and it wasn't. But for example, like Funny Story, Emily Henry, like I'm so happy for her. Like I think that she writes some great books. I'm not like obsessed with it. So my favorite Emily Henry book is Happy Place. But when I read Funny Story, I was like, okay, this is kind of what I expected. I didn't expect to like super connect to it and whatever, move on. I think The Fury by Alex Michaelides was a pretty big disappointment for me just because The Silent Patient is like one of my favorite books of all time. The Maidens was like okay. Like I think I gave it 4 stars. And this one I really expected to be obsessed with because it's these kind of like theater people. There's like a playwright, there's an actress. I don't even remember. There's like, oh yeah, it's like there's a playwright, a stage actress, and then a retired film actress. And they all go like on this island for vacation, and one of them ends up getting killed, and you have to like figure out like who it was that killed them and why they killed them and who it was that got killed. Like all you know is that somebody killed somebody. And so to me, like as a little theater geek, to me that has like all the elements of a story that like I personally want to read. It just didn't do it for me. It was a short book, so it was fine. It was under 300, it was like 290 something pages. I think I gave it like a 3-star. Like it wasn't absolutely horrible. I just was really expecting to love this book. I didn't really connect to any of the characters, which was surprising again because it's like they're all like these like washed up like theater and film people, which I love. I love that. And as I say, I really, really love all of these other 2 books, especially The Silent Patient. So this unfortunately was a disappointment. Biggest surprise. I've talked about this book quite a lot on my channel recently because it was featured in my 24-hour reading challenge and then my most recent reading wrap up, but that is The Comeback. This was a 5-star read for me. It has been on my bookshelf for so long, like definitely over a year, maybe close to 2 years. And I just like was like, it had like a 3 point something average rating on Goodreads, whatever. This was like so good for me personally. Again, like had all of the elements that I love, and like unlike The Fury, kind of like worked together in a way that I just really, really enjoyed. It's about this young actress. She kind of like disappeared from Hollywood. She went home to live with her parents in, I think, Anaheim, the day of like the Golden Globes or something like that. And it opens and she decides like, okay, it's time to like go back and like kind of like start reestablishing my old connections with like, she's married, like she like kind of like has this estranged husband, like she has old friends and like coworkers and stuff. Again, like very character driven book, wandering around her mental landscape in the dark side of LA. It's very like of the Me Too movement as well. The journey from beginning to end was amazing. And I really want to play this character. Her name is Grace Turner. Part of me is like, should I write to Ella and like, should we develop the screenplay together and produce it? I don't know. I'm just gonna manifest that because she's definitely my top 3, maybe even top 2 characters I want to play. My top character I want to play is Nesta Archeron, as everybody knows. She might top Daisy Hates. I just loved this book. I love books about the dark side of LA and like Hollywood and the film industry. And as I was reading it, more so than usual, like I just saw the shots. Like I saw like the dolly in and like the zoom out. Like I saw it. Highly, highly, highly recommend. I also think it's a great summer book. So please read this. Best audiobook narration. I'm gonna have to go with the Magnolia Park series as a whole. I read the first 2 books at the end of last year and then the latter 3 books the beginning of this year. Those audiobook narrators, like I feel like I would highly recommend doing a combo of audiobook narration and reading, especially if you're not British. There is something to be said about, and this is not the first series or book that this has happened with, where like I read in an American accent, like even if the characters are British, I don't have that skill to just like inside of my head like read with an accent for like a prolonged period of time. And there's something that happens when you hear British characters speak with a British accent and like from a British person, you just discover like more humor than you would if you were just like reading it. I don't know if that makes sense. It just like all kind of like ties in a little bit more when I'm listening to it. You hear more subtext. I don't know, just stuff that you wouldn't normally hear. And with the Magnolia Park series specifically, these actors are next level audiobook narrators. Like I think that they do such a good job. Audiobooks can really like wreck your experience of reading a book if you don't personally connect with the narrator, but these actors are so good. Especially like Magnolia, I think too, because I listen to audiobooks really fast and Magnolia has ADD and like her thoughts are all over the place, so it just kind of like had that extra layer of humor, I guess. a lot of her experience is like because of her ADD. And so I don't know. It really just, it really elevated it. I think they are fantastic, those actors. Favorite new author debut or new to me? I would say my favorite new author is probably Dolly Alderton. I've only read Good Material so far. I'm going to read Everything I Know About Love and Ghosts hopefully this summer as well. Good Material was just so, I loved the way that book was written. I loved the way she got into this mind of this like 30-plus-year-old man that was just so insecure and lost. She just nailed it, and I've heard great things about Everything I Know About Love. I'm really excited to read more of her stuff. There's like storytellers and there's like writers. Dolly Alderton is like, her prose is like amazing. She's just next level for me, so I'm excited to read more of her stuff. Newest fictional crush. Okay, I'm so sorry to disappoint people, but like my experience reading in my fantasy mind always goes to like, which character am I gonna play? Like it's more focused on me. Like I don't really crush on fictional characters. I'm so sorry to like disappoint anybody. It's just not an experience that I have. I love a lot of characters. I want to hug a lot of characters, but in terms of like developing like a crush on them, like that's just not something I experience. However, if I did experience it, I would imagine it would be with Ford Grant from Wild Love. Even though, like, I don't know, there were some things he did, I'm just like, you're just like a little out of touch as the world's hottest billionaire. I do think he's really sweet, and I would imagine if I did develop crushes on fictional characters, it would be on Ford Grant. No disrespect to like anyone that does have crushes on fictional characters, like I really support that. I think probably the closest I've ever gotten is Rhysand from McIntyre. Okay, newest favorite character. I've said this already, but I would say Grace Turner, but also getting into the next category too, which is a book that made me cry. I would say Jude is also one of my favorite characters. I can't cry before I even start talking about this book. Okay. Jude is one of my favorite characters of all time, and yeah, the next question is a book that made you cry. This book made me cry. I don't know what else to say. It was just a really sad book, but a really beautiful book. I had no idea that it was written by a woman until long after I had finished it, which I just think is so wild to me. This is not a book I would read in the summer. I would save this for cold, dark winter in New York City, personally. I'm so glad I read this. I'm so glad I don't have to read it again. I connected with so many people about this book. Like, I didn't know so many people in my life had read this book. And it's just one of those things, like, even like I went to an independent bookstore in the town my mom lives in New Jersey, and my mom and I actually read this book around the same time, so that was also like a fun kind of experience. But I mean, as fun as it can be when you're reading Little Life. But we like walked in and, you know, we were like, oh, we just read Little Life, and the guy that was working at the bookstore just started crying. He was like, it's one of my favorite books. Well, it's just, and then we started, like, it's just like, it's one of those things that, like, if you've read it, like, you can immediately connect with somebody else on like a deeply emotional level, even if it's just to laugh and be like, that was a lot. Yeah, I'm really happy that I read it. Yeah, Little Life, a book that made me cry. Next, a book that made me happy. This was a book I was like, it's called Ready or Not. It's like surprise pregnancy trope. This book made me so happy. Like, I genuinely loved every single character, from the main character to the best friend to the father of the child to the new guy. I loved all of them. I thought they all were perfectly imperfect, and they were all trying their best. It took place in, I think near like Park Slope in Brooklyn, and I live in Brooklyn, so it's like a New York, Brooklyn book as well. And I just really thought it was so lovely, and I really enjoyed it, and I wasn't expecting to, because I don't know, like, a surprise pregnancy trope isn't like top on my list of things that I want to read about. This proved me wrong. Like, I really, really, really enjoyed this book. I was like smiling the whole time I read it, honestly. My favorite book cover, I actually don't own this book, Cultish. I just think it's such a sexy book cover. I think that's like the point, is that like the cover is meant to like draw you in a cultish kind of way, because it's used with millennial like type designs and fonts and colors and stuff like that. But I just think it's gorgeous. It's such a beautiful book. I don't know what else to say about it other than that. Next, the best world building. I will have to go back to the Crescent City series. The first like half of the first book of the series, I'm just like, what is happening. And I know a lot of people experience that too. There's actually so much world building. Like I feel like Sarah J Maas, or other 2 series, there's a lot of world building, but it's like really easy to follow and it's like introduced in a digestible way. This is all kind of like thrown at you in the beginning, but then it all starts to make sense. I think Throne of Glass has the best world building out of any Sarah J Maas series, I would say. Maybe, I don't know if any of you agree or disagree, but say what you want about how it was difficult to keep up with the world building, but the world in this book was given a lot of thought. In this book specifically, the world building gets even more exciting for reasons that I'm not at liberty to say. A book that made me think is the book of Boys and Men. It's a nonfiction book. It's about the kind of crisis that men and like young boys are finding themselves in, and there's just a lot of like really shocking statistics and just like hard facts about how boys are like falling behind in like all aspects of life, kind of. This book really surprised me. He talks a lot about solutions to problems, and he's not just like, it sucks being a boy. Like that's not what this book is. It's like, hey, like there are some pretty surprising statistics that are developing now, and like here's some ways that we can work around it. I really do think everyone should give this book a read. And then a book I wish I could live in, I guess, would be Slow Days, Fast Company. The World, the Flesh in LA. This is nonfiction, but it just goes through like all of these different places in Southern California, and I love Southern California. Like we're in like Palm Springs. She's just all over Southern California in like the 60s and 70s. It's like I would love to live in that book. Sign me up, let's go. But I feel like honestly, like I'd want to live in this book for like maybe a month, and then I'd be like, oh, I'm done now. Then next is my favorite sidekick or supporting character. I hate to keep going back to this. Well, God, I actually like, now that I'm looking at just these books, and I only have a few books out here, but like just looking at them, I'm like, oh, like I actually really loved like a lot of supporting characters. I was gonna say what I originally wrote down is Lydia from this 3rd Crescent City book. Love Lydia. I love her arc. I love where she ends up, like the scene at the end. I also actually really loved like all of the supporting characters, as I mentioned in Ready or Not. If we're gonna go like the palette cleansing route, like I actually really loved her friend in this. I really loved the father of the child in this. Like you're meant to like hate those types of tropes, I think, that those characters kind of like represent, but then you kind of like, you go deeper with it for each of them, and you really understand where they're coming from. I really like that. But I also like Willem, Harold. Yeah, okay, well that's it. We'll end on a little life for you. Thank you guys so much for watching this mid-year, I don't know why it's called a mid-year book freakout tag. I've watched a lot of them, and no one's freaking out that much in them. Like, I mean, I don't know, like when I freak out, like you know, I didn't know freaking out in this. Sorry for the false advertisement, but it's what the video is like meant to be called. I never see anyone freaking out in these videos. So if someone could please explain that to me, I'd really appreciate it. Yeah, let me know like what you've read this year so far that you've really liked, any disappointments, any surprises, where you are with your reading goals. I love to connect about that. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.